I paid for the rehearsal dinner, the florist, the honeymoon suite deposit, and the custom cake topper my sister-in-law had shipped from a boutique in Portland. I even paid to have her mother's dress altered 3 days before the wedding, because the original seamstress canceled. And when they handed out the programs, the ones I had also paid to have printed, my name wasn't anywhere in them. Not in the acknowledgments, not in the bridal party list, not even in the small font thank you section at the back. My brother looked me in the eye at the reception and said, "Tonight isn't about you. Don't make it weird." So I smiled, hugged him, and the next morning, I made one phone call that changed everything they thought they still had. Ever wonder how long a generous person can go before they finally stop? I drove to Asheville on a Friday in October, the kind of day where the mountains looked almost theatrical, too orange and red to be real. My trunk was packed with extra folding chairs I'd rented because my brother's venue had miscounted the RSVPs. Nobody asked me to handle it. I just did, because that's always been my role. The one who notices the gap and fills it before anyone else, even registers there's a problem. My brother, I'll call him by what he's always been to me, which is the center of everything our family orbits, had been with his girlfriend for 4 years before he proposed. When he called to tell me, I cried. Happy tears. Real ones. I asked when the date was, and immediately started thinking about what I could contribute. What I didn't anticipate was that contributing would become my only function. The venue was a converted farmhouse outside of town, string lights, exposed beams, the whole aesthetic. His fiancée, my sister-in-law now, though that word still sits funny in my chest, had tastes that ran expensive. Which might have been fine if she'd had the budget to match. She didn't. My brother made decent money doing HVAC work, but weddings cost what they cost, and theirs was designed by someone with champagne expectations and a sparkling water reality. My mother called me 2 weeks after the engagement. "I need to ask you something," she said, which in our family means, "I've already decided and I'm calling to make it sound mutual." The florist deposit was $1,400. Could I cover it? Just temporarily. They'd pay me back after the honeymoon, when things settled. Of course I said yes, because that's what you do. That's what I'd always done. By the time the wedding weekend arrived, I had covered the florist in full. They never mentioned paying me back. The rehearsal dinner at an Italian place on Lexington Avenue, the cake topper, the alterations for my sister-in-law's mother's gown, and 2 nights at a bed and breakfast for my grandmother, who couldn't afford the hotel block. The running total in my notes app, the one I started halfway through when I got a little nervous, sat at $6,847. Not a single thank you card. Not even a text. I arrived at the farmhouse Friday afternoon to help set up. My sister-in-law's friends were already there, loud and laughing, hanging eucalyptus from the rafters. My sister-in-law swept past me with a clipboard in one hand and a coffee in the other and said, "Oh good, you're here. Can you move those chairs to the back row? We need the front ones for her people." Her people? I let that land somewhere quiet inside me, and then I picked up a chair. That evening at the rehearsal dinner, the one I'd paid for entirely, my sister-in-law's maid of honor stood up and gave a toast about how the couple had done this all themselves, with love and sheer determination. People clinked glasses. My brother beamed. My mother caught my eye across the table and gave me a small, tight smile that said she knew, and was sorry but wasn't going to say anything. I smiled back, ate my pasta. Said nothing. Later, in the bed and breakfast room I was sharing with my cousin who'd flown in from Phoenix, I sat on the edge of the mattress and opened my notes app, scrolled to the total, closed it again. My cousin, who is one of the few people in my life who actually sees me, put down her book and looked at me. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just tired." She gave me the look that meant she knew I was lying, but she didn't push. We turned off the lights. I stared at the ceiling for a long time. The wedding day was beautiful in the way that expensive things usually are. The flowers I'd paid for were stunning, cascading arrangements of white dahlias and eucalyptus that made the farmhouse look like something from a magazine. My sister-in-law floated down the aisle in her gown, alterations invisible, perfect. My brother cried when he saw her. I cried too, because in spite of everything, I love him. That part was real. What happened at the reception was not something I anticipated, but maybe I should have. The toasts began after dinner. My sister-in-law's father went first, a long, funny speech about teaching her to drive. Her maid of honor went next, brought out a poster board of baby photos. Then my brother's best man, who talked about fishing trips and bad decisions and the kind of friendship that lasts. Then my mother, who had told me she was going to mention my contributions, who had promised. She stood up, tapped her glass, smiled at the room. She talked about my brother as a baby. She talked about watching him grow into a man. She talked about how proud she was of the couple they'd become. And then she sat down. My name didn't come up once. I sat at table 7. Not the family table, the one off to the side, near the kitchen door. And I felt the specific kind of invisible that only your own family can make you feel. Not the kind where nobody knows you. The kind where they do, and they've chosen anyway. Later, when the DJ started playing and people drifted toward the dance floor, my brother found me refilling my water glass at the bar. He was loose from champagne, grinning, bow tie untied. "Hey," he said, pulling me into a sideways hug. "Tonight's been perfect, right?" "It has," I said. "You're not still keeping score, are you?" he said, laughing a little. Not mean exactly, but not kind, either. "Tonight isn't about you. Don't make it weird." He wandered back to his new wife. I stood there holding my water glass. I didn't leave dramatically. I danced once with my grandmother. I ate a piece of wedding cake. The one with the custom topper my sister-in-law had admired in an Instagram post, and I had found and ordered and paid to ship. I said goodbye to my cousin, who squeezed my hand and said, "Call me tomorrow." I drove back to the bed and breakfast alone. That night, I sat in the small armchair by the window and opened a voice message I'd been avoiding. It was from my father, who passed away 2 years ago. I know that sounds strange, keeping old voicemails, but I have 3 of them saved. I play them sometimes when I need to hear something true. In this one, he was calling to check in after a hard week I'd been having at work. His voice was unhurried. He said, "You have always been the one who makes things work. I need you to know that I see it. I see how much you give and how little you ask for. I'm proud of you, kid, not for what you do, just for who you are." I listened to it twice. Then a third time with my eyes closed. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even particularly sad in the way people expect when they imagine a moment like that. I was just recalibrating, the way a compass does when you've been carrying it near something magnetic for too long. I thought about a birthday party 3 years ago, the one I'd organized for my brother's 35th, reserved the rooftop bar, coordinated with his friends, baked his favorite carrot cake because he'd offhandedly mentioned once, years ago, that store-bought cakes always taste like cardboard. My sister-in-law had posted the photos afterward with a caption that read, "He deserves all of this and more. So glad we made it special." I remember reading that and thinking, I wonder what she did specifically. I thought about last Thanksgiving, when their furnace broke, and I lent them my credit card to get it replaced because it was a holiday weekend and the service company required payment up front. They paid me back $300 of the $900 the repair cost. It just never came up again. I thought about the rehearsal dinner receipt sitting in my email inbox, the florist invoice marked paid by me, the alterations confirmation with my card number. And I thought about the programs, the ones I had designed the layout for. Yes, designed, because my sister-in-law sent me the text file and said, "Can you make this look nice? You're so creative." And paid to have printed at a shop downtown, the ones that listed the bridal party, the musicians, the officiant, the venue, the florist, and a thank you to everyone who made this day possible. I turned off the lamp. I didn't decide anything that night. I just let myself stop pretending the weight wasn't there. The next morning, I drove home. Asheville to Charlotte is about 2.5 hours, and I made it in silence. No music, no podcasts. Just the road and the hills flattening as I got closer to the city, and somewhere around the halfway point, a clarity that arrived the way clarity usually does. Not all at once, but like light coming in under a door. I wasn't angry. Anger would have been easier, honestly. Anger burns itself out. What I felt was more like recognition, the slow, settling understanding that I had been functioning as infrastructure, invisible, load-bearing, essential, and completely taken for granted. The bridge doesn't get thanked, it just holds. I got home, made coffee, sat at my kitchen table. Then I opened my laptop. The joint credit card, The one I'd been the primary holder on for 4 years, since my brother had a rough patch with his credit score and I'd added him to help him rebuild, was the first thing I looked at. Current balance, $2,300. Charges from the past month I recognized as his. A hardware store in Asheville, a gas station, a restaurant I'd never been to. I called the card company, removed him from the account. Next, the shared streaming subscriptions. 3 of them, all on my card. Gone. The recurring grocery delivery account I'd set up, that they'd been using. I'd noticed charges from their zip code for months, but figured it was some kind of glitch. Not a glitch. I revoked the shared access. And then the thing I'd been turning over in my mind since the reception. The wedding gift. The envelope I had brought. The one with the card I'd written by hand, and the check inside for $1,000, which I had tucked into the gift basket, and which my sister-in-law had opened at the bridal shower preview 2 weeks earlier and said, "Oh, that's so generous of you," before setting it on the pile and never mentioning again. I called my bank. Put a stop payment on the check. It wasn't theatrical. I didn't feel triumphant. I made myself a second cup of coffee and sat back down and thought about whether I was doing the right thing. Here's what I kept coming back to. I had never asked to be acknowledged at a podium. I hadn't organized the rehearsal dinner, hoping someone would toast me. I'd done those things because I loved my brother and I wanted his wedding to be beautiful. But there's a difference between giving freely and being mined, between generosity and being someone's resource. And somewhere in the past year and a half of wedding planning, I had stopped being a sister and become a line item. That night, my phone started going. First, it was my brother. "Hey, weird thing. My card got declined at dinner. Did something happen with the account?" I didn't respond right away. I was washing dishes, and I let the message sit there. Then my sister-in-law. "So we just found out you removed him from the credit card. Can we talk about this?" Then my mother, which surprised me. "I heard about the card. I know you're upset, but this isn't the right way." I dried my hands. I sat down at the kitchen table again, and I typed one message to all 3 of them in separate threads, because I didn't want it to become a group conversation where everyone could perform their outrage at each other. I'm not upset. I want to be clear about that. I've been thinking about this since well before the wedding, and I've been trying to figure out how to say something for a long time. I funded most of your wedding weekend, nearly $7,000, and I'm glad I could do it. But I wasn't included in the programs. I wasn't thanked at the reception. I wasn't even at the family table. I've been doing versions of this, covering expenses, filling gaps, handling logistics, for years. I'm not doing it anymore. This isn't revenge. It's just the first time I've set a boundary that has any actual weight to it. I sent it, put my phone face down on the table. Let out a long breath. The responses came in waves over the next hour. My brother said he hadn't realized how I felt. My sister-in-law said the programs had been a last-minute chaos situation, and she was sorry my name was missed, and then 2 sentences later said she thought I was escalating something minor. My mother called and left a voicemail saying we needed to talk. I listened to the voicemail once. I didn't call back, not because I was punishing anyone, but because I'd spent years responding immediately, smoothing things over, explaining myself clearly and patiently, and then absorbing the outcome regardless of whether it was fair. And for once, I just didn't. The stop payment on the check went through 2 days later. My sister-in-law texted to say she'd tried to deposit it, and it bounced. And was this intentional? I said yes. She asked why. I said, because I sent that check to celebrate a marriage I'd invested in emotionally and financially, and I needed some time to decide whether the relationship going forward warranted that kind of investment. There was a long pause. Then, "I can't believe you're doing this over a program." I didn't respond to that one. It wasn't about the program, and she knew it. The program was just the thing that finally made the shape of everything else visible. Here is what nobody tells you about being the capable one in a family. It becomes your identity before you consent to it. You handle things well once, and suddenly handling things is your function. You're reliable. So, reliability becomes your only value. You give without being asked, and soon enough, the giving is assumed. And because you never complained, because you genuinely didn't mind at first, because you love these people, there's never a moment where the expectation gets examined. It just compounds, quietly, the way interest does. My grandmother called me that Thursday. She's in her 80s and has always been direct in the way people are when they've run out of time for anything else. I heard there's a situation, she said. There's a situation, I confirmed. Your brother's hurt. I know. Are you okay? I told her the truth, that I was better than I'd been in months, actually, that I felt like I'd been carrying something in my chest for a long time, and I'd finally put it down, that I loved my brother and I was going to be okay with whatever happened next, but I was done organizing my generosity around whether people said thank you. She was quiet for a spent. Then she said, "Good. Now call me when you've got time and we'll have coffee." That was it. No lecture, no taking sides. Just a woman in her 80s who had probably learned this lesson a long time ago, recognizing it in me, and letting me have it. A week after the wedding, my cousin, the one from Phoenix, texted me a photo. It was a screenshot of my sister-in-law's Instagram. A series of wedding photos, beautiful ones, all that white dahlia and eucalyptus and golden October light. The caption read, "Couldn't have dreamed it any better, every detail exactly as we imagined. To everyone who showed up for us, thank you from the bottom of our hearts." I looked at the picture for a long time, the flowers I had paid for, the exact moment they'd been arranged. Then I saved the screenshot to a folder I'd created, called simply Record. I didn't post anything. I didn't comment. I didn't send it to my mother or forward it to anyone. I just named it, filed it, and closed the app. There's a version of this story where I reach out, where I sit down with my brother over coffee, and we talk it through and he finally understands. And my sister-in-law apologizes in a way that sounds real, and we all come out the other side closer for having gone through something hard. I'm not going to tell you that version, because it hasn't happened yet. Maybe it will. I genuinely don't know. What I know is this. The week after I came home from Asheville, I slept 8 hours every night. I cooked meals as I actually wanted to eat. I signed up for a pottery class I'd been putting off for 2 years because I never seemed to have the time or the energy. I had the time. I had the energy. It had just been directed elsewhere. On a Tuesday morning, I sat at my kitchen table with coffee and the early light coming through the window, and I wrote in my journal for the first time in 8 months. Not about my brother, not about the wedding, not about the money. Just about what I wanted my own life to look like. It took me almost an hour, and by the end I was crying. Not from sadness, but from the strange, unfamiliar feeling of being asked, even just by myself, what I actually wanted. I'm still figuring out what to do with my brother. The relationship is bruised, and I think it needs time and honesty in equal measure. I'm not close to it, but I'm also not willing to be the one who initiates the repair while still waiting for an acknowledgement that the original wound was real. Some people are going to read this and think I was wrong. That family is complicated, that weddings are stressful, that people miss things in the chaos and it doesn't mean they don't love you. I understand that. I'm not claiming malice. I'm claiming a pattern, and patterns don't require malice to cause harm. They just require nobody stopping long enough to look at them. If you've ever paid for the party and sat in the back row, if you've ever written the card, baked the cake, arranged the chairs, handled the thing nobody asked you to handle, and then watched someone else take the bow. I want you to know that noticing it doesn't say small. It doesn't make you petty. It makes you someone who's finally paying attention to the cost of their own kindness. Setting a limit is not the same as closing a door. Sometimes it's the only way to find out which ones were ever really open.